What are we doing?
All right, so why don't you each maybe take a moment and talk a little bit about maybe how you got roped into this, because I'm assuming that the story might be a little different for each of you. And why don't we start with Bob?
I thought I was done. No, I think Douglas Preston forced me to write a story. I think that's what happened. No, I'm on the board of the Authors Guild Foundation, and as a board member, I do just about nothing. So I don't contribute anything, I don't do anything, and it's such a good organization. And when they started the idea of doing an anthology, I said, well, this is something I can do, and I was thrilled to be able to. Seriously, to be with all these amazing authors and to be part of it.
None of whom are dead.
Yeah.
The evening is early.
So for me, I got this message from Doug, I'll give this to you, which was irresistible. He said, every writer has a story in a drawer somewhere that she hasn't gotten out, and she doesn't quite know what to do with it. Maybe it's not quite finished, maybe it's just in the back of your mind, but there's a story that you don't have out there. And this is the moment to bring that story out. And Doug included a story that he'd written that was not really finished either. It was just a memoir, something that had happened to him as a child. He wandered into a strange place and gone through some old things that were in a building. And it was kind of creepy and kind of wonderful, and about children, about what they find. And I thought, I have the story. This is a story that I've never written down. It's something that happened to me, but I wrote it as a short story, not as a memoir. But I said, this is perfect. And I wrote it down and sent it off. And then he wove this wonderful narrative that includes everybody in the anthology, the collaborative novel, and they're all people living in the same building. So they don't have to be alike, they don't have to even know each other, they don't have to have the same background. So it's a perfect format for him, and we could all just go into that drawer and pull out that story and send it off.
Hi, I'm Rachel. Hi. I got the same letter, and I thought, oh, they're just being nice because I'm on the board, so they're going to include me as somebody who can submit, but obviously I won't get chosen. I was having one of those days. Ever have one of those where you're like, well, obviously this was just somebody trying to be a little bit nice to me. But I thought, oh, or maybe they want one from the point of view of the kid, because I write for kids. So I guess I have to write one about a kid. What if I don't? What if I write one about adults? They're not going to choose it anyway. It doesn't matter. So I wrote one from the point, I wrote two, because I was like, whatever. They said, send in whatever you want. So I was like, okay. So I sent in two, and it's for a good cause, and it was going to be all these famous authors. So I thought, well, what fun to have submitted one that gets rejected with all of those famous people who let's sort of be in the room, even if you're sort of in the back of the room. So they said yes to two of them, but only one of them is in the book. They said they couldn't figure out a way to work the other one in. And now, having read the book, no spoilers, but I read the book, and I'm not going to tell you what happened, but it turned out better even than I thought it would. But there's no way they could have woven the other one into the narrative. I'm shocked that they figured out, that Doug in his brilliance figured out a way to weave the one that they did put in the book, because it doesn't make sense. If it wouldn't have been an obvious one to me, but he found a really fun way to put it in there. So,
well, if you read the book and you come to the one story that's really funny, it's hers.
Thank you. That's
I haven't read the book.
So it's just a
Short story, I don't read short stories.
but they're not, it's a novel, that's the
No, it's not, it's
So-
short stories.
And then you thought, what else? It was terrible.
Um,
I didn't say that.
it is a novel. I thought it was gonna be a collection of short stories, but it turns out it's a novel. And you know how sometimes you're reading a novel and the different characters all sound the same. And it's like, nobody sounds all the same, all these different people in a town, they all sound the same. That's not what happens in this. They really sound different from one another. And it's so brilliant because, of course, they are written by different people. And one of the things I think is fun about this book, it's a sort of a meta thing we can talk about more, but if you come to something, you're like, whoa, I love this bit, then you can do a little detective work and find out who that author is. I have some new favorite authors that I discovered by reading this book and being like, whoa, this is really good. I'm so wrapped up in this little bit of the novel, not the short story.
Excellent. So you've not read it yet. Yeah,
What?
I said you've not read it yet, but you have both read it.
I read.
No, I've read some,
You've read
I've read some of the stories. Storybook. I've read some of the stories.
It's been like to the camera and to Canterbury Tales. I read all of them. This one's much more fun. About how sort of the literary lineage of this and how it compares or does not.
What?
More than
You got that question? You could answer that question?
So how does it,
What?
it's been compared to the camera and to Canterbury Tales, but is that an apt comparison? Or is it something?
It's a bunch of people coming together every night and telling stories and sitting and becoming a community. And, you know, during COVID and the lockdown, and they're up there every night. If you want to relive the great old bad days of COVID, it's all in this book. Everything. He didn't leave anything out. But the thing is, I'm being silly, but you can just dive in there. The stories are wonderful. And you can just go in anywhere and pick it up and read just some amazing writing,
That is true.
you know.
That is true.
I want to tell you about my story, which is about, I always try to bring the level down a few notches. And mine is everyone in the building always comes up every night and they tell stories. Well, I have this guy who comes up, he's a stand-up comic. He's a comedian and he's failed. And he's come up to the roof to jump off. That's my contribution. This was actually inspired by a true comedy club story. Actually, I have two comedy club stories, and then I'll shut up. No, because I'm talking. Two comedies, these are true stories. My friend Eric was in a comedy class. And one night his class was appearing at an open night mic at a comedy club on First Avenue in the city. And my wife and I went to see and cheer Eric on. And before Eric went on stage, this guy came out, this comic from the class, and he did this act. He said, my ex-wife, I'll tell you, my ex-wife was so fat, if you turned around, my ex-wife, she was the worst. I can't believe my ex-wife. That was his whole act. And the women in the audience started to hiss. And he went on, my ex-wife, she was so ugly, she couldn't walk with, you know, and the women are hissing and booing. And finally, he just walked off. It was a totally offensive act. And then Eric went on, he was pretty good. And I called him the next day. I said, Eric, you were great. But that guy who went on before you, and he said, I'll tell you a secret about that guy. He was never married. True. There was no ex-wife. Then a couple weeks, I'm almost done. A couple weeks later, we were at another comedy club on the east side, and the MC You know, there's always a guy who introduces the acts and he's funny in between. He was obnoxious. The guy was just, you instantly hated him. It's one of these people, I mean, he shouldn't be in public. He was just horrible and he was insulting to everyone. And he was just awful and he wasn't funny. And he would introduce each act. And I turned to my wife and I said, someone is going to kill this guy. And 2 weeks later, someone came up to the theater and shot him dead.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know why I think that's a funny story. Why do I think that's so funny? It's a good story. I'm done.
That's gonna walk me.
So did you want to talk about, you didn't talk about your individual stories, or you can mention the concept, so it's very meta.
Yeah.
So that might be kind of fun to talk about.
I'll do this. So here's my thought about why this is a very meta book. During the pandemic, we were all kind of isolated, kind of. And the way that we came together, I feel, is we've told each other stories, and that's how we sort of bridged the loneliness of it. And here it is, this book is a bunch of writers telling their stories, and it's a story, a big story about people in a building telling their stories to one another and how we come together over stories and sharing that way. And here we are doing it here tonight. I feel like the idea of the Authors Guild and the foundation is to bring people together to tell stories. So it's like layers of how we connect. And the pandemic pulled us apart, right? It was a tale of isolation, but the way that we pulled through is by pulling together. And the way that we pulled together, in my experience at least, and this may be true of you, is we started telling one another stories. Some families had game night. Some families started doing Zooms with their distant relatives. We had to find ways to connect because we were so alone. And in the Decameron and in other stories of plague, I feel like what happens is we tell one another stories, and that's how we become ourselves and we figure out who we are, and also how we pull through hard times. So that's my theory of the book being so meta. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah.
Yeah, agree. Do you want to tell about your story and I'll tell about mine? Or read it?
I'll just add, no, I won't read it, it's too long, but I'll add one aspect of this that connects to the Authors Guild, and that is one of the things the Authors Guild does, and we're the oldest and largest writers organization in the country. One of the things we do is protect copyright. And copyright is written into the Constitution of this country because the founders believed that people who wrote stories, who wrote anything, should have the power of ownership over their work, and they should receive compensation for that work. And the reason they did that was so that this democracy would continue to have stories written, ideas put forth, philosophy created, political notions put out, and the people who wrote those stories should be compensated, should be treated with value, because it's so valuable to have stories written down and stories told, as Rachel says. Telling stories is the way writers live, and it's the way everyone actually understands the world. When your mother tells you a story, when you're little, you're listening to her, you're watching her face, and the way she tells the story of what happened at the supermarket informs you about your place in the world. So I would stand up to Bob Stine and say reading stories is actually nothing to sneer at. Stories are really important.
Well said.
So did you want to talk about, and then we're going to throw to the audience to see if you have any questions. So start thinking about what you want to know. And you're welcome to ask questions about this book or any of their work or their work in general. But did you want to talk about what you have coming up? And if you want to say no, like some authors do, some authors don't. But if you want to talk about what you're working on, what you have coming up, or any other works that you want the audience to know about. And why don't we start with you?
Okay, I forgot to say, I'm Roxana Robinson, and I actually, that's who I am, and I actually have a book coming out in 5 days, so this is kind of an exciting moment for me. It's a novel called Leaving. It's a novel, not sure it's the right. And it just got reviewed in the Washington Post, so I'm very excited. That's my news.
And I will say about that review, I just read that review. It is a phenomenal review, and I'm only annoyed that I can't buy the book today while I'm here. Yeah, well, and you should, because my goodness, what a review. And she's a brilliant writer, as is Bob. I have a new picture book came out called Sometimes I Kaplume. That's my newest that's out, and I have a sequel to that, but picture books take forever because artists draw. It's very annoying. But I have actually, my exciting news that I just got permission from my son to share is my son is a theater guy, and he and I have adapted one of my books called If We Kiss, and it's going to have its off-Broadway premiere in April. Awesome. You're all invited. And in fact, if you follow me on whatever, and you see it, I'll give you a discount code. I'm gonna make one up right now and tell him, these are my people. RJ Julia is the discount code. It will give you a discount code for the play. Okay, so. I just decided that. And I'm sorry about that money. These people are so nice.
Details.
Hey, Julia, any way you put it for the discount code, I'm gonna just tell him, I'm his mother. I think that's fair.
I don't have a discount code. Sorry. I have great movie and TV news, actually. The new Goosebumps comes out in about a month. Hey, 31 years of Goosebumps? Are you kidding? Right? The new series is called Goosebumps House of Shivers, and the next one is called Goblin Monday,
Nice.
which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but wait till you see Goblin Tuesday. It's going to be better. Anyway, I'm happy to say that Netflix greenlighted a new Fear Street movie, which is going into production in April based on The Prom Queen. That's a Fear Street movie. So that's good news, right? You like movies. And Disney renewed the Goosebumps TV series for a second season. So I have a lot of good news. I could have a discount code.
RJ Julia.
That is great. Okay, questions from, right back there.
Were you guys aware of the other author's stories?
So let me just repeat the question for the. So you were wondering
At what point in the process were the authors aware of what the other authors had written?
at what point in the process did you become aware of what the other authors have written?
When we read the book.
Wow.
Right.
No
Yeah.
idea till then, none.
No, we didn't see anything.
No idea, didn't know the twist, didn't know if there was a twist, didn't know the other twist, you know, no idea.
When you saw the book in like its first edited form?
Yeah, they sent an ARC, which is advanced reader copy, like it looked like this, but soft cover, and sent it, and they're like, congrats. And then I just read it that night. I was like, oh my gosh, what? I was like, I wonder if mine's in there. Nope. No. But so, you know, and then it's like, oh, wow, this is so different from what I expected. So, yeah.
Right there?
Were you given any parameters to your story or just write whatever?
None.
Write whatever.
Right,
But
but
I still have to pull on this.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Can't imagine how they did it.
Right there next to you, yeah.
It's for R.L Stine. A little off topic.
It's okay.
What gave you the inspiration to start writing children's horror novels?
You know, I just like to scare kids. It's a great job. Yeah, I will tell you the truth. I started out doing a teen series of scary books called Fear Street. And we were killing off teenagers every month. So people love that. They love it when you kill teenagers. I don't know why. And editors came to me and said, no one has ever done a scary book series for 7 to 11-year-olds before. We should try it. And I said, no, I don't want to. So that's the kind of businessman I am. That's what it is. And they finally talked me into it. But that's You grew up reading Goosebumps, and did you turn out okay?
Okay, yes, right back there. Okay, so the question is, what was your favorite Goosebumps book to
I
write?
guess The Haunted Mask, you know that one? The girl puts a mask on and sticks to her face. That's my best Halloween story.
Okay, 2 more questions. I see an arm back there. Oh, so are there any other questions over here? Okay, this is the quiet part. Okay, so we have the young man back there, then you, and then the plaid up here. Okay, great. Yes, sir. Yes. What is everyone's favorite book that you've written?
I think I just told mine.
For me, it's always the most recent one. I never go back and read my other books. Like it was like, there's like a spell, you cannot go back. So it's my most recent one, the novel Leaving.
Ugh. I think If We Kiss is right now because I just had to reread it, break that spell. It's really horrible. It's so scary to go and read something that you wrote a while ago and think, what if it stinks? What if this is terribly embarrassing? But revising the script. So I went back and reread this book and it made me laugh. I was like, oh my God, Charlie is so funny. Charlie's the main character. And my husband was like, you wrote that. I mean, okay. But so right now my favorite is If We Kiss. Great.
Okay, back there.
What advice would you give to an author who's trying to break into the mold today?
Okay, what advice would you give to an author who's trying to break into the mold today? Does this author have a particular genre or just breaking in? Okay, great.
Yeah. Or if they were starting off today.
If you were starting off today.
Oh, I would like go to law school or something. Right? Something like where they pay you money all the time. That would be a good idea. But if I had it in my head to try to break into it now, I think the thing is read a lot and keep going. I had a playwriting teacher in college who changed things for me by saying, I thought I should be like Mozart. Like I imagine Mozart, like you sit down and inspiration is gonna like hit you like a seizure, and then something brilliant's gonna come out, or else you're not real, you're not a real writer. And his theory was, of course the first thing you write is a cliche and boring because it's front of mind. That's what you've read or heard. So keep going, keep revising. Maybe by the 50th draft, you'll have reached mediocrity, which is amazing because you're on your way. So fantastic, keep going. So I guess that would be my other advice. Read a lot and write a lot and just keep rewriting.
And I'd also say write about something that is something you can't ignore, that is very, very important to you, that is the most scary thing that you can write about. Go where the fear is.
Interesting. That's
Very interesting. There are other things that are scary in your list.
No, that's really good. I never give advice to young writers. because I don't think they need it. I think they're like me. They know they want to write and they're writing all the time. And they don't need me to tell them anything. But my only advice would be, don't listen to all the authors who say that writing is hard. Don't listen to them. I'm on all these writer panels all the time. And there's always some author who says, oh, writing is so hard. It's so hard. I have to lock my kids in the garage to have something to write. It's so hard. Writing is easy. Writing is not hard. It's, no heavy lifting, no hard hat, and it's just fun. You're creating, you have to think of it as fun. You're creating a world. You're creating your own character. I think if you go into it thinking writing is hard, it's going to be hard for you. But if you go into it thinking, gee, this is fun, what a great thing to be doing, it's going to be much easier for you. The other thing I really hate is these authors who go into schools and they have school assemblies and they say, write from your heart, always write from your heart. Those kids will never write another word. Never. I've written over 300 books, not a single word from my heart. That's the truth. You write to entertain people.
And do you have a question? Yeah. So my question is, what are you, do you have anything currently like on your nightstand, table that you're reading or want to read?
Excellent question. What is on your nightstand table that you are reading or would like to read?
I'm in the middle of this really good book called A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki, I think her last name is. It's so good. And I don't know how it turns out because, I'm in the middle, but that's the one I'm in the middle of.
So I'm reading a book called Trespasses. It's by a woman called Louise Kennedy. She's Irish. It's her first novel and it's brilliant. The language is so beautiful. Story is kind of heartrending. It's a wonderful book. Trespasses, Louise Kennedy.
Nice. I read mostly mysteries and thrillers. And there's some guy wrote, and I think his last name is Stevenson, wrote a mystery last year called Everyone in My Family is a Murderer. And it was a really entertaining book, very clever, very droll. And his new one just came out last week, and I'm reading it. This one is called Everyone on This Train is a Suspect. And it's really fun.
Okay, one last question here. No questions from here. Okay, you guys are great. All right.
If sort of maybe a couple questions tonight. What is a book that inspired you or made a big impact in your life, whether in childhood or even today, that really helped inspire your writing?
What book inspired your writing, whether from childhood or from today?
When I was 9 or 10, I read only comic books. I didn't read books. People always say, what was your favorite children's book? I said, I read comic books. And one day my mom dropped me off at the library. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, at the little library, and the librarian was waiting for me. And she said, Bobby, I know you like comic books. I'm going to show you something else you might like. And she took me to a shelf of Ray Bradbury's stories. And that changed my life. The stories were so creative and so imaginative and all twist ending. And Ray Bradbury turned me into a reader.
So when I was little, I was horse crazy. All I thought about was horses. I subscribed to horse stores, companies. I would get the new Miller's catalog and the Kaufman catalog, and I would look at martingales and bits and the different kinds of curry combs. I just loved horses, and I knew every horse. I lived in the country. I knew where every horse was for 10 miles around, and I would go around and ask if I could ride them. So the book that made me start thinking about writing was a horse book. I read every horse. My father was the head of a school, and so at 3 o'clock, everyone else in the school would get picked up by their parents, and I would stay alone with my father because he was working, and so I lived in the library for those 2 hours every night. So I read every horse book in the library. And the one that made me start thinking about writing was by Enid Bagnall, and it was called National Velvet. So you all know the story. You've probably seen the movie. It's a wonderful story, but it's incredibly beautifully written. And I remember taking a book into my mother's bedroom and listen to this sentence. It was the first time I thought, how the words are put down on the page is just as important to me as the story.
Beautiful. When I was a kid and I read kids' books, I found them absolutely terrifying. The idea, like the fantasy aspect of it, I was a very imaginative kid. I thought it was all realistic fiction, all of Roald Dahl. I thought all that was realistic fiction. And I was like, I knew it. I knew scary stuff would happen. So when I discovered Judy Blume and Paula Danziger, and they were talking about stuff like going to the shoe store and your brother has a tantrum and your mother looks at you and says, why do you have a hole in your sock? That's so embarrassing. I was like, oh my God, Judy Blume knows me. She was in the shoe store with me and my mom and my brother. And Paula Danziger was writing about, people, kids and teachers in schools and feeling uncomfortable, changing into your gym suit and like your body wasn't right. And Judy also was writing about that. And I thought, they see me and they respect me. And I lived in those books, and I did not want to be a writer when I was a kid. I had lots and lots of different ambitions, thinking I needed to be struck by lightning by some kind of talent and not finding one. So I thought I would be a spy, and I literally went to college to be a spy. That wasn't when I was like 7. That was when I was literally applying to college. But like I always knew exactly what I wanted to be. It's just it changed often. And so when I started writing a book, it was because I couldn't figure out how to make the story in my head into a play, which was my at that moment ambition. And actually, the first person who interviewed me about the book said to me, how do you remember so well what it's like to be a kid? And I was like, oh my kid. I didn't want to say. I was like living in my parents' house. I wrote the book while sleeping in my canopy bed. And I was like, I have a good memory. Realistic contemporary fiction was where it was at for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Great questions. I appreciate that. So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you to all of the authors. It was wonderful. So give us a minute. We will relocate over to the signing desk.